How's it going, guys? I'm Garrett Brown, avid drummer of 17 years. I play in a band called The Unsung.
Truth of us needs, but the truth is nothing more than a false reality.
And I've been drumming in the style of metal and progressive metal, as well as other genres across the spectrum for a lot of years. So let's get right to it. How are we gonna do a linear chop? So something that a lot of YouTube drummers talk about is these little hand exercises and things you can do to do linear chops. A lot of them are based around rudiments, and you end up using them and kind of chopping them up and mix matching them in order to develop this sort of palette, if you will. But if you don't want to go through the whole exercise of, oh hey, let me get this inverted paradiddle diddle down, or oh great, now I need to learn a master blush does. There's a way you can think about drumming in a linear chop to get off the ground a lot more quickly. So what is a linear chop? A linear chop is any sequence on the drum kit where at any one point in time, you're only playing one item on the kit, whether that's the ride bell, ride shoulder, hi-hat, floor tom, snare drum, kick, rack toms, etc. One of the ways that you can get started by digesting this rhythmic concept is just knowing that there's only one thing allowed at a time. Now, if you're sitting at a full drum set, you probably have 2 rack toms, you have at least 1 floor tom, and you have a variety of cymbals to choose from. Trying to figure out what sounds best as you hit it can get a little bit intimidating at times. So let's start by trying to reduce the analysis paralysis of the drum set. So a good way to get started with developing a linear chop is just by reducing the pieces of the kit you have available to you. You already know going into this that you're only allowed to hit one thing at a time, but because you have so many options to choose from, it's just overwhelming. So what I like to do is I like to start off with the hi-hat, snare, kick, and 1 floor tom. This makes it really easy because kick, snare, hat is it doesn't have a lot of color to it. It's very black and white. It's kind of like your salt and pepper, your most basic spices that you have available to you for the creation of backbeats and now chops. And the floor tom is maybe one color, so it's kind of like working with black, white, and red, for example. Now, as you're in a beat, in a backbeat, and approaching a chop, one thing that you can do and take liberty with now with this reduced setup you have is you can hit almost anything in any sequence as long as it's just one thing at a time. And you can work out the development of what sort of sounds you like. If you're familiar with rudiments, one thing I'm partial to is dicing up right-left kick or left-right kick and alternating between those accordingly to create a lot of dynamic contrast between the floor tom and the hi-hats because of their timbral differences. Another thing to consider is while you're developing your chops and trying to navigate your way around this reduced version of the drum kit, an important thing that makes a chop sound good or bad is usually by maintaining a backbeat snare accent. So in some of these examples following, I typically keep a snare accent on beats 3 just to maintain that pulse, and it doesn't end up getting lost. And especially if you're new to this whole thing, you want to try and maintain that as much as possible so that way you don't end up losing yourself, don't get lost in the sauce. So pardon me that I cheated a little bit on that, as I've just been doing this for a while and kind of developed my own sound. I use my muscle memory to my advantage, which is why I got the rack toms and like the stacker involved. One of the things that you can do, or one of the things that I emphasize, which you can hear in the clip, is the fact that I like to use my stacker a lot as well. And the thing about that, whether it be like the hi-hats, the stacker if you have one on your kit, or perhaps using the ride bell, the thing is that they have a lot of high-end attack, and the stacker and the hi-hat specifically serve a more staccato role, which creates a really nice dynamic and timbral contrast from the toms themselves, which it's the one thing that adds a lot of dimension to your linear chop, which is how you can get this kind of, this kind of more in-depth listening experience as you're playing it. And I end up using some of the other voices just per muscle memory and some of these flavors that I've ended up developing as I've been working on my chops for quite some time now. So there you have it. Long story short, you're only gonna hit one item at a time. And to get started, just reducing your kit down to a couple of integral parts and figuring out how to maintain that one backbeat element throughout your chop is going to give it some gravity and make sure that it retains its direction. This is a great way to get started. It's a great way to just think about your chops, and it really leaves you with the maximum flexibility to start treading new ground and exploring, rather than just hashing and rehashing other people's keys to victory. So get out there, put some time in the shed, and I'll see you guys on the next video.